If you're hearing this, it means I've ignored the warning. I should have deleted everything the second I saw it. I should have burned the drive, smashed the laptop, walked away, and never looked back. But I didn't. And now, I don't know if I can undo what I've set loose. You think you know SpongeBob, right? That goofy laugh, the pineapple under the sea, the endless reruns on Nickelodeon. We all grew up with it. Harmless, lighthearted, a background noise to childhood. But that's what they want you to remember. The safe, sanitized version. The truth is different. Most people think the so-called lost episode is just another creepypasta, a joke, an urban legend to pass around on forums when you're bored at 3 a.m. I thought so too. I laughed about it once. But when I found the file, the real file, all those stories suddenly felt like someone trying to warn me in code, like breadcrumbs leading into a place you're not supposed to go. I can still see the folder name in my head, buried deep, like it was desperate to stay hidden. I remember how my hands shook when I hovered over it, the way my stomach turned before I even clicked, as if something in me already knew. And if Nickelodeon ever found out I still have fragments of it, let's just say they'd erase me faster than a botched pilot reel. You're not supposed to watch it. Hell, you're not supposed to know it exists. But since you're here, listening, maybe you deserve to know what I saw. This isn't a campfire story. This isn't a chain email from the early 2000s. It's real. And the worst part? Once you've heard it, once you've imagined it, you're already part of it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start at the beginning. Back before the file. Back when SpongeBob was still just SpongeBob. When I was a kid, Saturday mornings had a rhythm, a kind of ritual that defined my little world. I'd wake up before anyone else, shuffle into the living room in pajamas still warm from sleep, and switch on the old boxy TV. Nickelodeon was my sanctuary. Bright colors, canned laughter, voices that wrapped around me like a blanket. And right at the center of it all was SpongeBob. It's almost impossible to explain what that show meant back then. Every kid at school quoted it. "I'm ready," or "Is mayonnaise an instrument?" were more than catchphrases. They were social currency. If you knew the lines, you belonged. The humor was silly, harmless. Or at least, that's what we thought. I remember the intro especially, that pirate voice booming from the screen. "Are you ready, kids?" It always felt like it was calling directly to me. I'd shout, I, Captain, at the top of my lungs, even though no one else was awake to hear. That opening theme felt safe, familiar, like the doorway into a world where nothing bad could ever happen. But looking back now, I wonder if it was ever really that innocent. Because sometimes, even then, there were moments. Little things I couldn't put into words. A flicker in the animation, a pause in the laugh track, the way SpongeBob's eyes seemed too wide in a single frame before cutting back to normal. My friends never noticed, or if they did, they brushed it off. But it stuck with me. And then there were the rumors. Kids whispering about episodes you couldn't find on TV. Stories of animators slipping adult jokes into frames, or secret broadcasts aired only once in the middle of the night. Most of it was playground nonsense, but I couldn't shake the idea that behind the goofy songs and slapstick, there was a shadow, something darker lurking behind those smiles. Still, I didn't think much of it as I grew older. I left the pineapple under the sea behind like most people do, moving on to other shows, other obsessions. But nostalgia has a funny way of sneaking back into your life. By the time I hit my 20s, SpongeBob wasn't just a cartoon from my childhood. It was a relic, a way to feel like a kid again in a world that kept getting colder. I'd stream old episodes late at night, telling myself it was just background noise. That's all it was supposed to be. But there's a difference between revisiting the past and having the past come knocking on your door. Because years later, I'd stumble across something that forced all those half-forgotten memories into sharp focus. A folder I wasn't supposed to find. A piece of SpongeBob that didn't belong to reruns or DVDs or harmless nostalgia. And the second I saw it, I knew. All those tiny things I'd brushed off as imagination weren't accidents. They weren't glitches. They were warnings. Warnings I didn't understand back then, but I do now. It all started with that folder. The folder was hidden 3 directories deep, like someone wanted it erased, but couldn't quite let go. I wasn't even looking for anything special that night. I'd bought an old external hard drive at a flea market. Dusty, heavy, the kind of outdated hardware you pick up for a couple bucks thinking you'll use it for backups. It was scuffed all over, a faded property of Viacom, sticker peeling off one corner. I thought it was junk, but when I plugged it in, the drive spun up with a low, uneven whir, like an old man trying to clear his throat. At first, it was boring. Random junk files, corrupted Word docs, half-finished spreadsheets, audio files that wouldn't play. But then I noticed the structure. Someone had buried folders inside folders, directories nested like Russian dolls. And at the very bottom, tucked away in a place I almost missed, was one with no name at all. Just a blank icon, sitting in silence. I hovered my mouse over it, and my screen flickered for a second. Just once. I thought it was a glitch. When I clicked, the folder unfolded into another. This one had a name. SB_0417. I can't explain why my stomach dropped. It was just a label, a string of letters and numbers. But it felt wrong. Like looking at a date you know you should remember, but can't. I sat there staring at it for a good minute, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Inside were only 3 files. A thumbnail that wouldn't load, an audio track labeled intro_mix, and a video file with a cryptic name, just 0417_final_cut.avi. The thumbnail was broken, all gray static. I double-clicked, and for half a second, an image flashed. I couldn't catch it all. Jagged colors, SpongeBob's outline warped like he'd been stretched across the screen. Then it vanished, replaced by an error message. My hands were clammy as I opened the audio track. The file started with the familiar ukulele strum of the SpongeBob theme song, but it dragged, slowed down like a record warped by heat. The pirate's voice was lower, guttural, as if he were speaking from underwater. At one point, the track cut out completely, and for 3 full seconds I swear I heard breathing. I should have stopped there. Anyone sane would have dragged the folder to the recycle bin and wiped the drive. But instead I felt this strange pull, not curiosity exactly, but compulsion, like the file wanted to be seen. That's when I clicked on the video. The name, 0417_final_cut, nagged at me. It wasn't formatted like any broadcast episode number I'd seen. I knew the show well enough to know Nickelodeon never had an episode 0417. It didn't exist. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to. I told myself maybe it was a scrapped pilot, something left on a workstation by accident. A mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. Whoever had buried this file 3 directories deep hadn't done it by accident. They wanted it hidden, but not gone. The screen dimmed as I moved my cursor over the icon. For a split second, my reflection flickered in the dark monitor, pale and nervous. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked play. The screen went black for a moment after I hit play, the kind of void where you wonder if the file is corrupted or if your machine is just taking too long. Then, suddenly, the familiar ukulele chords kicked in, bright, bouncy, exactly as I remembered them. For a second, I almost laughed. Maybe I'd scared myself for nothing. There was the pirate's voice, booming as always. "Are you ready, kids?" I braced myself for the comfort of nostalgia, but something was off. The call-in response echoed faintly, like it had been recorded in a cavern. And the children's voices? They were late. Not by much, just a half beat behind, but enough that the rhythm felt wrong. The intro rolled on, colorful and cheerful, though the saturation seemed dialed down. SpongeBob's pineapple was duller, Bikini Bottom's ocean floor tinged with gray instead of bright turquoise. I told myself it was an early render, a test file. Cheap excuse, but I clung to it. The title card flickered, SpongeBob SquarePants, then melted into the first scene. We opened on the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob stood behind the grill, spatula in hand, whistling as patties sizzled. At first glance, everything seemed fine. The animation was fluid, the background noise of customers chatting and cash registers ringing in place. But the longer I watched, the stranger it felt. The sound of frying burgers dragged too long, hissing like steam pipes. SpongeBob's whistle wavered, the notes sour, slightly detuned. The frame rate seemed inconsistent, smooth one second, jittery the next. Squidward shuffled into view, carrying a tray of drinks. SpongeBob turned toward him, beaming that wide, eager smile we all know. "Good morning, Squidward," he chirped. Except his voice cracked in the middle, a burst of static ripping through the syllables. Squidward froze, staring. His eyes drooped heavier than usual, as though someone had shaded bruises beneath them. "Don't talk to me," he muttered, but the words dragged into a groan, warped and stretched. The laugh track kicked in right after. Except, SpongeBob had never had a laugh track. It was canned laughter, grainy, too loud, and it didn't match the timing of the scene. SpongeBob blinked at Squidward, frozen in a smile, while the audience cackled on. I leaned forward, unsettled. At first, it just looked like a bad render, maybe a corrupted export, one of those half-finished test animation studios keep hidden away. But then, the frame cut. For less than a second, another image spliced in. SpongeBob's face filled the screen, but his eyes were blank, void black. His mouth hung open wider than his head should allow. Then gone. Back to the Krusty Krab. The show limped along, every detail sliding further from normal. Customers in the background didn't move. They just sat frozen, mouths open as if mid-sentence, while SpongeBob kept flipping patties. The grill smoke thickened until it looked like gray fog spilling across the floor. Then came another cut. Squidward again, closer this time, staring dead at the camera. His pupils were small pinpricks, the whites yellowed, cracked with red veins. He didn't blink. He just looked at me. When the scene snapped back, SpongeBob was still cooking, humming off-key. The sound design had degraded even further, frying noises loud enough to drown dialogue, while a faint, constant hiss bled beneath everything, like tape static. Another flicker. A single frame of something I couldn't quite catch. It looked like a human hand pressed against glass, blurred by water. By now, my chest was tight. I wanted to pause, but the controls didn't respond. My mouse moved, but the progress bar didn't show. I was stuck watching. The scene crawled to a halt. SpongeBob turned back toward Squidward, his grin twitching wider, teeth too sharp now. His eyes jittered between normal and hollow black, frame by frame, almost subliminal. Then, silence. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, nothing. Just the void. And then the static roared to life. Harsh, violent, filling my speakers with a sound that wasn't quite noise, but not quite voice either. And out of that storm of static, a title card appeared. Not the bright, playful fonts from Nickelodeon. Just 2 words, stark white against black. Episode 0417. The static didn't fade back into cheerful ukulele music. It clawed at my ears, high-pitched and relentless, until the screen burst back into animation. But it wasn't the Krusty Krab anymore. The camera panned across Bikini Bottom, except the colors had bled out entirely. The sky wasn't blue but a sick, ashen gray. The sand on the ocean floor looked like dust. Buildings stood tilted, warped, with their outlines fuzzing at the edges like bad VHS tracking. Then SpongeBob appeared. He wasn't bouncing along merrily or blowing bubbles. He just stood there, in the middle of the street, hands dangling limp at his sides. His pupils were mismatched, one dilated to fill the eye, the other shrunk to a tiny pin. He blinked once, but it wasn't animated. It looked like a jump cut, as though frames had been torn away. The audio had gone almost silent, save for a faint hum, like fluorescent lights. Then SpongeBob leaned forward, slowly, too slowly, and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I froze. It wasn't Tom Kenny's usual goofy, high-pitched voice. It was lower, ragged, distorted, and the words seemed to buzz inside my headphones, layered with static. The frame stuttered. For a split second, the cartoon world disappeared, replaced by a grainy shot of what looked like a hallway. Fluorescent lights overhead, linoleum floor, the kind you'd see in an office building. Empty. Then back to SpongeBob, still staring. Another flicker. This time, a conference room. A table, chairs pushed back. No people. The camera angle looked handheld, tilted slightly. Back to the cartoon again. Squidward entered the scene, moving in stop-motion jerks instead of fluid animation. His clarinet dangled from one hand, the reed chipped. He turned to SpongeBob and opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, black text flashed across the bottom of the screen for less than a second. "We didn't mean to show it." I leaned closer, trying to rewind, but the controls still didn't work. The message was gone as quickly as it appeared. SpongeBob turned to Squidward, lips twitching. He whispered again, though this time the words overlapped themselves, like multiple voices all saying it at once. "They're watching us." The hum grew louder, rattling. Then the screen snapped to another burst of real footage. This time, Nickelodeon's lobby. I recognized it instantly. The orange splat logo, the reception desk. Only the room was dark, lit by a single swinging light. The camera drifted too smoothly, like it wasn't handheld at all, but pulled along on tracks. Back to animation. SpongeBob was closer to the screen now, his face filling half the frame. His teeth weren't cartoon white anymore. They were cracked, yellow, jagged. His smile twitched wider than it should. I swallowed hard. This can't be real, I muttered. But it. Patrick wandered in next, but his body was misshapen, bloated on one side as though his starfish arms had been stitched wrong. His voice bubbled through the speakers, slurred and gurgling, like he was drowning mid-sentence. And then another flash, this time a single frame of something I'll never forget. A person. Real, not animated. Just a man sitting at a desk, head slumped forward, face blurred. His shoulders twitched once, like a puppet on strings, then the scene cut away before I could process it. I can't describe everything I saw after that. You wouldn't believe me if I did. Maybe that's why they buried it. Not because it was unfinished, but because no one would accept it was real. The show began splicing back and forth so fast between cartoon and reality that my brain couldn't catch up. Bikini Bottom twisted into empty Nickelodeon hallways. Patrick's distorted laugh warped into static. SpongeBob's eyes flickered from wide-eyed innocence to gaping holes of black. And through it all, messages kept flashing at the bottom of the screen. Not for airing. Turn it off. Do not share. I reached for the keyboard, desperate to stop the playback, but nothing responded. Escape key, spacebar, even Control plus Alt plus Delete. The episode refused to end. It wanted me to see. The last shot in that sequence burned into me. SpongeBob pressing his face against the camera, his breath fogging the inside of the lens, eyes wide, lips trembling as he whispered directly into me. Not at me, but into me. You saw it. You can't unsee it. I yanked the plug from the wall. The laptop screen stayed on for 3 more seconds, bright with static, before finally collapsing into black. But the damage was already done. It felt less like watching a cartoon and more like being watched. The laughter track that had started faintly out of sync was now a jagged, mechanical screech, like rusted gears grinding through speakers. The once bright colors of Bikini Bottom had sunk into something gray and diseased, like the saturation had been drained and replaced with ash. SpongeBob stood frozen in the center of the Krusty Krab. His body swayed slightly, as if his animation cycle had been cut short, leaving only a puppet hanging by invisible strings. Then his face shifted, not in the comical, exaggerated way the show always played with expressions, but in a way that felt wrong, like a photograph stretched until the pixels bled together. His wide eyes drooped, the whites clouding over as if waterlogged. His smile collapsed into a slack gape, corners of his mouth dragging toward the floor. Yellow sponge turned slick, melting, dripping in rivulets that pulsed like blood through cheesecloth. Squidward entered frame. At first, his walk cycle was normal, his clarinet tucked beneath his arm, eyes half-lidded with boredom. But then he stopped. He looked, not at SpongeBob, but directly into the camera. At me. His pupils shrank into pinpricks, then dilated until they filled the whites, swallowing the scara like a spreading ink blot. The clarinet slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a sound that wasn't a sound effect, but the hollow clatter of real wood on real tile. And then the screaming began. It wasn't cartoonish, not the overdone shriek of slapstick pain. This was raw, animal, a sound that clawed its way from a throat made of muscle and tissue, not pixels. Squidward's scream filled the room, and for a moment I forgot I was sitting in front of a laptop. My skin prickled, hair standing stiff on my arms. The audio peaked so high that my cheap headphones vibrated, trembling against my skull. But behind Squidward's scream, layered deep into the static, were other voices. Human voices. Male, female, overlapping, chanting, or begging, in a language I couldn't place. It was as if the episode's audio track had been replaced with 1,000 whispers funneled into my ears all at once. The screen flickered, cutting between SpongeBob's melting face and something else. Real footage. Grainy, handheld shots of what looked like an office. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. a desk stacked with tapes, each labeled in thick black marker, 0417, test reels, property of Viacom. The camera panned down a hallway lined with posters of Nickelodeon shows, their colors drained until only the black outlines remained visible. And then, the people. For less than a second, the frame cut to a group of employees, animators, maybe, judging by the drawing tablets on their desks. But they weren't working. They sat completely still, backs hunched, faces slack. One of them, an older man with thinning hair and glasses, lifted his head slowly, as though against some invisible weight, and looked into the lens. His eyes didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, like he was trying to send a message through the footage, like he wanted me to know he was still in there. Back to SpongeBob. His face had collapsed entirely, a cavernous hole gaping where his features had been. Inside wasn't sponge or anything cartoonish. It was black, wet, and from that darkness came faint whispers. "Do not look. You shouldn't be here. They'll know." The words weren't subtitled, weren't clear, but I felt them in my bones, as though the meanings bypassed sound and burrowed directly into my nerves. The episode cut again. Another subliminal flash. This time, text. White on black, flickering too fast for comfort. "Do not share. This was not for you." I yanked my headphones off. My breath came shallow and ragged. But the sound didn't stop. The laptop speakers hissed with static even though the volume slider was all the way down. I pressed escape. Nothing. I slammed the spacebar. The video didn't pause. Squidward's scream deepened, distorted into a metallic roar. His body convulsed in jagged frames, each one snapping into the next like a broken flipbook. SpongeBob's form melted further until nothing remained but a slumping pile of yellow sludge, bubbling and twitching as if alive. The camera shook, zooming closer to the hole where his face had been, pulling me in, frame by frame. And then, silence. The screen went black. For a moment, I thought it was over. Relief flooded me, shaky and thin, until the text appeared. "Do not share." This time, it stayed on screen. Letters jittering, twitching like they were being written live, one keystroke at a time. The laptop fan roared, louder than it had ever been before. The edges of the screen bled white, like light seeping through cracks in the glass. My reflection stared back at me, warped by the glow. And for a split second, I thought I saw someone else in that reflection, standing just behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. When I turned back, the text had changed. Nick knew. The words pulsed once, twice. Then the laptop screen blinked out entirely. Darkness swallowed the room. The only sound was my own heartbeat, hammering in my ears. I don't remember falling. I don't remember hitting the floor. But when I opened my eyes, I was sprawled across the carpet, the laptop closed beside me. Its surface was warm, too warm, as though it had been running far longer than a single video should allow. And burned into the center of the screen, faint but unmistakable, were the ghostly remnants of those words. "Do not share." When I woke, the room was quiet, but something was off. My head throbbed as though I'd spent the night pressed against an amplifier. The laptop sat where I'd left it, closed, its surface still faintly warm. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. But when I touched the trackpad, the truth sank in. The machine was dead. Completely. No startup chime, no fan, not even the faint glow of a charging light. It was as if the video hadn't just crashed the system, it had killed it. That should have been the end. Most people would have taken the loss, replaced the laptop, maybe shaken their head at a weird file, and moved on. But my mind kept circling back. The screams, the messages, Squidward's eyes, staring past the fourth wall like he knew I was there. And those words, burned into the screen, faint but undeniable, "Do not share." That night, I dreamed of Bikini Bottom. Not the one I grew up with. Not the bright underwater carnival of bubble transitions and goofy slapstick. This version was submerged in a deeper, heavier sea. The water was dark, suffocating. SpongeBob's pineapple house was half-sunken, windows black. The streets were empty, except for a faint sound that echoed through the water, SpongeBob's laugh. Except it wasn't cheerful, it was warped, slowed, dragging like a tape being eaten by a VCR. I woke drenched in sweat. And still, in the silence of my room, I could swear I heard the faintest echo of that laugh. tucked somewhere in the walls, like it had followed me out of the dream. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, sleep deprivation. But instead of pushing it away, I opened my phone and started searching. SpongeBob 0417. SB_EXE. Nickelodeon lost episode. Anything that could explain what I'd seen. That's when I realized how deep the rabbit hole went. There were threads scattered across old forums, half buried in caches, where users whispered about a banned episode that no one was supposed to see. Some called it Squidward's test, others 0417, like it was cataloged in some forgotten archive. Details shifted from post to post. Some said it was a suicide tape, others a scrapped experimental short, but the core was always the same. People who saw it never forgot it. But here's the thing. Every lead I followed ended the same way. Links to videos led to page not found. Screenshots blurred into pixel mush, like they'd been corrupted on purpose. Even the usernames, gone. Accounts deleted, wiped clean, as if the people had never existed. It wasn't the normal decay of the internet. This felt active, deliberate, like someone was sweeping the trail as quickly as it appeared. The more I dug, the stranger it became. A handful of references pointed toward old Nickelodeon production logs, dates and tape numbers that didn't match any aired episodes. One comment claimed employees had been warned never to mention 0417, that it was tied to something far more sinister than just a canceled storyboard. Another swore they'd seen it during a late-night shift at the studio, but their post cut off mid-sentence, unfinished, frozen like they never had the chance to hit submit. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. I knew what I'd seen. I'd felt it. Days blurred together. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't hold a conversation without my thoughts drifting back to Bikini Bottom's hollow streets and SpongeBob's dripping grin. I spent hours scrolling through archived forums, clicking dead links, saving fragments of text before they could vanish. My search history became a graveyard of deleted pages. And all the while, the dreams continued, each one darker than the last. Sometimes I'd wake with the echo of Squidward's scream still rattling in my chest. Sometimes I'd see flashes of that office footage, the man with glasses staring through the lens, waiting. I started to wonder if it was more than just a lost tape. If Nickelodeon had stumbled onto something they couldn't explain, something they couldn't contain, and the only solution was to bury it deep, deeper than even their archives could hold. But burying it hadn't worked. Because I had it. I'd seen it. And if the whispers online were to be believed, I wasn't the only one. I started piecing things together the way you'd assemble a puzzle from matches, edges first, then the blurry center. The deeper I dug, the more official the evidence looked. Court filings, redacted memos, forwarded emails that smelled of panic. It felt like watching a skeleton being lifted from a bog. A sterile PDF of a lawsuit named a tape number, a production code, and grievances about unauthorized footage and emotional distress. There were no screenshots attached, just typed text and a lawyer's signature. The claim closed quietly. Why would a children's network defend a tape so fiercely? Forum archives held testimonies, half-formed and fearful. An ex-animator wrote about a test reel screened to executives, color experiments, audio loops, layered real sounds under animation to test emotional response. It read less like television and more like behavioral engineering. Someone sent me an email chain with the blunt subject, "Do not show." One line in the body stopped my fingers cold. "You don't understand what we unleashed." No signature, just that sentence, and a date that matched other production logs I'd already dug up. I copied it into a document and sat with it. The sentence reframed everything. This was deliberate, not accidental. Terms repeated. Test episodes 0417. Response tape. The words were clinical, like lab notes. Posts described frames flashed too fast to see, audio frequencies tuned to shift mood. It felt like an experiment performed in public. Then the darker rumors began to surface. At first they sounded like urban myth, rituals, late-night chanting, but the same claims turned up across independent threads. One mirrored forum quoted a sound engineer who described layering breathing loops and something like a chant beneath the theme. Another poster reported executives watching reels in dim rooms and speaking of feeding the image, as if the footage required something from its viewers. A cached interview with a former insider made my skin crawl. He spoke cautiously, staring just off camera. "We thought we were advanced," he said. "We thought patterns could nudge people. It got ahead of us." He didn't elaborate. The paper trail split into sterile bureaucratic records, NDAs, indemnifications, settlement notes, and human fragments. An apologetic recruiter email, notes from contracted counselors, references to personnel hastily moved off projects. One HR memo mentioned mandatory counseling after an unnamed event. Another file ordered teams to transfer personnel away from a coded project. Taken together, it read like triage. I reached out to former staff listed in credits. Replies were scarce. A sound technician sent a voicemail that was nothing but low static in a single breath. His profile disappeared the following day. An animator politely declined and then scrubbed his social presence. Moderators on old forums locked threads mentioning 0417. Entire accounts were removed. I found a payroll entry labeled confidential services dated the same period as the production codes. Local news archives briefly mentioned staff departures and health scares at the studio. Those articles were later removed. Cached YouTube clips titled 0417 leaks surfaced and vanished within hours, replaced by takedown notices citing Viacom. The comments that remained were eerie. One simply read, "Do not look." I contacted a lawyer who handles media cases. He cautioned that corporations have deep archives and deeper counsel, then asked whether I had physical evidence. I told him about the hard drive. He paused and said, "If you pursue this, you'll be poking a sleeping giant." It was the most honest sentence I'd heard in weeks. I bought a burned DVD at an estate sale. Someone had scratched 0417 into its face. The disc was corrupted, but the smell of it, old smoke, varnish, felt like a relic taken from a burned room. I kept it anyway. When I tried to post my findings, threads vanished within minutes. Accounts that shared screenshots were suspended. One moderator DM'd me a single sentence, "Stop digging." A voicemail arrived later that contained only breathing, then a click, then nothing followed. Some of you watching this might already know the code name. Maybe you've seen it scribbled in an old thread or found a stamped tape in a box of discarded reels. For those who have, the numbers should make your skin tighten. But it wasn't just research. Things got personal. It started small, the way mold starts as a single spot on a wall before devouring the whole house. A sound here, a shadow there. Things I told myself were stress, sleep deprivation, paranoia. But denial only works for so long. The first time I noticed it, I was on a call with my brother. We were talking about nothing, rent, groceries, the usual, when the line fizzed. For a heartbeat, I thought it was just interference. Then I heard it. A laugh. High-pitched, broken, stretched like rubber pulled too thin. SpongeBob's laugh. Except it wasn't coming from either of us. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" he said. His voice was normal, but the line behind him carried that warped giggle, faint but unmistakable, before dissolving into static. I hung up. My hands shook so badly I could barely set the phone down. That night, the dreams returned. Bikini Bottom again, but this time I wasn't just watching. I was standing in the middle of the empty street. The buildings leaned inward as though they were eavesdropping. The sand crunched under my shoes. My real shoes, not cartoon flippers. I looked down, and my skin was changing. A porous texture, yellow, sponge-like, creeping up my arms. I woke gasping, clawing at my skin. There were no holes, but the feeling lingered, like phantom itch. Soon it wasn't just in my head. Outlines began to appear on my window at night. Condensation, maybe, but shaped wrong. Round eyes, too wide, pressed against the glass. When I wiped it away, the print smeared but didn't vanish. By morning it was gone. And it wasn't just me. A friend of mine, one of the only people I trusted enough to tell, asked to see the file. Against every shred of instinct, I copied it over to him. He watched it. The next day he called me. His voice trembled, like he hadn't slept. He said he kept hearing static even when the phone wasn't near his ear. He said SpongeBob's voice was whispering things he couldn't repeat. 2 days later, he stopped answering texts. His apartment was locked when I checked. Lights off. Mail piling at the door. It was like he'd been erased. I tell myself he just left town. Changed his number. Started fresh somewhere else. But deep down, I know that's not true. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't let go. The bleed-through escalated. My phone lit up at 3 a.m. with numbers I didn't recognize, caller IDs full of garbled symbols. When I answered once, all I heard was the creak of a chair and faint breathing, followed by that laugh again. I smashed the phone against the wall. Bought a new one. The calls followed. Mirrors became dangerous too. Sometimes when I brushed my teeth, I'd catch a flash of someone else standing where I should be, a yellow blur with too many teeth, grinning too wide. If I blinked, it was gone. But the toothpaste would taste faintly of salt water. I stopped looking in mirrors for long. At this point, I realized the episode wasn't just a file. It was a contagion, a seed planted by whoever, or whatever, made it. Once you saw it, it rooted itself inside you, twisting perception, bleeding into waking life. And the worst part? I can feel it spreading even now, through me, through these words, through the memory of that cursed episode. Which means if you followed me this far, if you're still listening, I'm sorry for what I'm about to show you. Because it spreads if you see it. And now, you've seen enough. If you think this is just a story, a viral video to make your skin tingle before you click away, you're already missing the point. I've made jokes about creepypasta threads, laughed with strangers in comment sections, and shoved unsettling screenshots into group chats as if it were a dare. That was different. This is not different. This is real. I'm telling you now, please don't go looking. Don't type SpongeBob _0417 into a search bar. Don't click strange links. Don't download files from dusty drives. Because if that folder exists on a server somewhere, or on a hard drive someone thought was trash, it will respond. It will find a way to show itself to you, and it won't stop at the edges of your screen. I know how the internet works. I know curiosity is a muscle you can't help flexing at 2 a.m. I know the itch to prove the legend wrong, to be the one who uncovers something history forgot. I get it. But this isn't a mystery to solve. It's a wound that heals over only to reopen when pried. If you search for SpongeBob _0417, it will find you first. Maybe you think I'm asking you to be cowardly. Maybe you think I want to hoard the truth because possession equals power. That's not it. I don't want anyone else to carry this weight. I don't want the way it crawls under your skin, how you wake with salt on your lips, how laughter becomes a trigger you can't ignore. If you've already seen it, you know what I mean. You felt the aftertaste, the phantom textures, the way the world tips for a breath. You also know there's no official place to go for help. Corporate statements, legal teams, takedown notices, they paper over it and then disappear. The official narrative is tidy, a corrupted test, a prank, a hoax. The unofficial one is messy, and it doesn't end with a refund. I can't take this back. I can only ask, please, if you value your quiet nights, your ordinary routines, leave it buried. Walk away from threads that whisper the numbers. Tell a friend to stop if they post a screenshot. Delete the file if someone sends it. Turn the volume down and don't rewind. Because once the image has you, it doesn't share the mercy of forgetting. Please, not anymore. They say stories end where they begin. This one doesn't feel finished. My voice is thinner now, as if the edges of me are fraying. When I speak the words slow, they come out with a crackle, like a cheap speaker struggling against feedback. Maybe that's the file. Maybe that's the part of it that keeps a hold on me. A little static lodged between syllables. Listen close, and you might hear the pause between breaths, the place where the image tastes like metal. I tried to ignore the afterimages. I tried to sleep in rooms with the lights on and coffee beside the bed and common sense as a pillow. It didn't help. Sometimes I wake and the room smells of salt. No ocean near me. Just the phantom tang of sea and the scent of fried food, greasy and wrong. Once, when I blinked, for half a second I saw the pineapple house reflected in the black window, small and distant, like a photograph placed where it oughtn't to be. People ask if pictures can travel, if a voice can be a vessel, if seeing is the same as catching. I don't know. All I can tell you is what happened to me. After the file, the world got thinner at the edges. Colors dulled, laughter delayed. Sometimes a neighbor's chuckle stretches, and in that stretch I hear a syllable that doesn't belong, a whisper of warning or a tag, I can't tell. I haven't proven causation, only correlation. But correlation is a chain. One link grows warm, then another. I'm careful now, but careful isn't immune. The last time I recorded myself reading these words, the playback picked up something behind me. A breath that wasn't mine, a soft bubble of sound that ended in a laugh I recognized and wished I did not. You've heard enough. Too much, maybe. Maybe this is the point where you close the tab and forget the odd searches and the friends who stopped answering. Maybe you don't. If you don't, you already know the rules. Don't host the file, don't upload the clip, don't forward it as a joke. If you've seen anything like this, tell me, leave a comment, a theory, a warning. Share what you know, but be careful how you say it. Words spread faster than files. Don't download files you don't trust. Ever.